The traveling that I do gets me around the world. I've gone to Japan, this is 3 years ago, the land of the rising sun. Obviously they have the best sunsets ever. And also it's a very competitive area for glass, so to get in there is quite difficult. I got an introduction by somebody who's Takeshi, he runs a studio in Osaka, and the studio is not public accessible. I did an internship there for 2 months. I actually traveled for 1 month and worked for 1 month for him as well, which is where I realized I'm quite tall. I also work in Czech. There's a lot of studios up in Czech. There's a lot more glass than there is in the rest of Europe. I would say it's the glass centrum of Europe at the moment. Pacinek Glass is a large studio who's a lot of people come and work there. Obviously you've probably seen Martin if you've ever come into the studio last summer. He did a demo for the National Glass Center, and I work with him sometimes if possible. Some random pictures of the people that I've worked with over the past years. This is Janusz Pozniak. We did a masterclass in Czech Republic, and well, this is the introduction of why I got into arts. When I was living in Holland, I was working as a desk job. I have an engineering background, hence I like minis probably. But I've always been a drawer. I've always been a painter as well. I've always looked into illustration, and I've wanted to do character design or storyboards. So I went to the Rietveld Academie in Holland. Rietveld Academie is the most renowned academy in Holland, and it's the only glass department we have in any university. It's not like in England. There's quite a lot of glass. There's very little glass in Holland. This is kind of my background, how I got into the creative industries. I don't really do that much with it anymore. I've really stuck into glass. The first things I started doing with glass were obviously related to my background as an artist or drawer. At Dudley College, I first introduced Dudley College obviously. I started at Dudley College in 2004. Which is when I came to England. The reason I came to England is at Dudley College I didn't have to pay any college fees. It's quite simple. I'm Dutch. Everything's cheap. We're trying to keep it as cheap as possible. At Dudley College, it's a glass techniques and technology college. It's not so much for design or anything else like that. So I focused mainly on techniques, especially for the first year. You'll see this is Dudley College, actually, the college building. And you'll see in my portfolio from the first year, I've kind of looked into every type of shape and every type of technique possible for my work. These are Marinis, I do overlays, I do stemware. It's all quite fancy, and you'll see that there's only one of each because obviously I wasn't that good. So the portfolio kind of consisted out of random objects with which I've traversed quite a lot of techniques. Roll-up techniques was my favorite, which is the RU002 in the middle there. It's a technique where you do a fused plano and you actually roll it up back into the hot shop and blow a vessel out of that. I wanted to always combine my work as a drawer or an artist or an illustrationist with my work, and I started doing that at Dudley College, but like I said, in the first year I kind of focused on the techniques more than the imagery. In the second year, I came across something known as photosensitive glass, and it gave me the opportunity to actually apply my imagery to glass. It's the same as a transfer and works similar. It's not actually the same because the material that you're seeing is just purely glass. It's not been transferred onto the material. The image has been transferred to a photosensitive material. And I played around a lot with patterning. This is actually my brother's dog that you'll see in the picture there. It gave me the opportunity to look into the transfers thing, and I don't like transfers. I like process, especially because as an artist or as a designer, I like working directly onto the material. I don't like doing numbers, so 1 by 2 and 3. Painting my numbers is quite boring. So I kind of finished that project thinking I don't like it because it's painting my numbers. You have to do something on the computer which you then transfer. Later on I realized that you can actually apply marker pen to the same materials. Photosensitive kind of works as an exposing image. You work it in temperatures, you have an exposure time with light which applies the image, and then your development time is actually heat. And this means that if you have a blank vessel and you can apply an image to it with a marker pen, and you can eventually reheat the vessel, and then blow it up and twist the image whatever you want. But it kind of gave me the opportunity to first time work directly onto the glass. There is a lot more differences that you can do with this, but the effects are quite nice. It is kind of limited. There are only one color is available of it, which is a photosensitive red. They call it ruby, but it will, depending on how much exposure time you give it and how much development time you give it, you can get a different hue to it. Hence the blue around it, which is, it looks blue in the picture, but it's actually slightly purplish. After a while, I started looking into, when I was working in Holland, I thought vessel work is not the only thing I want to do because of the character design I've always done. I've kind of looked into figurative glass a bit. And figurative glass for me was an interesting step into something. It's just quite limited at the time, especially because of my technical skills. I did a few versions, quite a few versions of these actually. They're based on a product that's called a money, and a money is from Kid Robot. It's a combination of graffiti and character design. And because in graffiti they do a lot of character design as well, they actually ended up making vinyl figures. They're similar to this. I just started replicating them to see how it works in glass. That's why I never moved on with it until later on in my career. And later on in my career, after I finished at Dudley College, that's a 2-year degree actually. I went and traveled for a year. I worked in Holland, I worked everywhere else in Czech as well. And I ended up back in England because of Bournemouth and Poole College. Bournemouth started a degree actually, and they also did a college vocational degree. And at first I did the vocational degree. This is Rob Marshall, he was my tutor at the time. Rob is a very old glassmaker in the UK. He was trained by Ronnie Wilkinson at the Glasshouse College, which is quite a traditional training. Previously at Dudley College, the training I had was very limited because they kind of focused on just all the basic techniques. But Rob Marshall, I got to move on quickly from that because he had a lot of more skill than most of the tutors that I had. The Glasshouse College, which I mentioned, doesn't exist anymore. It's a very old education they set up in London to save the studio industry or the glass industry. So I was quite lucky to be taught by somebody who was trained up there. This is Rob in his younger years, obviously making some stemware. And this is the studio at Bournemouth and Poole College. Also has closed now. They closed it 2 years ago due to just lack of funding, as most of the departments are closed these days. My work in this figurative glass has kind of bled into my product design. At Bournemouth and Poole College, we had to make a product, we had to do designing towards a brief. And I decided to make the product into something that I liked and also didn't like, urns, which is kind of a touchy subject for most people. And I wanted to involve something in the urn which kind of makes it more cute. It's a very morbid thing, an urn. So I thought of the title, Endearing Urns. And it's not so much with the imagery, the endearing part is actually just the figure on the top. Again, it's a cuteness factor. I didn't want it to be too much of an indicator of what it is, so I don't give it eyes, I don't give it a character, because it'll give itself a character. And I want people to be able to read into that. I did a lot of different versions of that, small ones, large ones. They all tend to be quite cute, actually, if I may say so. My first exhibition was based on that. So I liked the subject and I liked the techniques I used. I ended up not making any more of these because...
Sorry, Christian, may I ask, have any of these been used?
Yes, they have. And this is what I was going towards. The reason that the subject isn't that nice is because you have to talk to the customer about the person they lost. And this is not your normal sales technique, obviously. You end up having to talk about pricing, talk about colors, and it all relates back to the deceased person, and most of the time that's not a nice connotation to give to the work. It's not a nice conversation to have. They're very thankful for it, but it's not something I want to get back into. I did small character design as well at the time, as you can see in the picture. It's still just cuteness factor, but I have moved on with that. It'll come later on in the presentation, actually now. This is, again, back in Holland. I get to develop a lot more work there. It's a freelance studio. It's also funded by the government, so obviously we get paid to just make work there for the shop. which means you get to play around a lot. There's no pressure behind the glass, which means I kind of played around a lot with the figures, and I've made little families out of them. I've tried different techniques, different outcomes, obviously, and every time I've made them, they turn out to be quite interesting.
How big?
They stand about 40 centimeters tall. I think that's just over a foot. I've tried to scale them up because of the cost involved in making them. You have to look into cost and effectiveness, obviously, when you're making glass. This is, eventually the museum asked me to do a project for them. We all, as freelance glassmakers, got asked to partake in this project, and it was an exhibition called Homemade. And I decided to do something with these characters and based it on the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys. As you can see, I've added a fourth monkey to that, which is do no evil. I have to apologize for some of the picture quality because they're not all as good as they should be. Seeing, hearing, or sorry, seeing is in the middle, sorry. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, and do no evil. I related back to the internet, which is why I gave them a brain, because people have to think about what they're doing on the internet these days. There's no morality anymore. I can go deeper into the kind of the concept behind it, but I wanted to show you that I do something else with just the character design as well. There is possibilities, there's endless possibilities when it comes to it. The brain technique led me onto something, which is, hang on, first of all, I've got to touch onto these. This is my latest iteration of I call these chibi. They're not so much related anymore to the original graffiti scene as more to a Japanese anime scene. In anime, they do a lot of character design and they kind of make these into miniature characters and it becomes chibi. Chibi is the word for small. And I've looked into that. It's the proportions of the characters which are more interesting to me. So large head, large ears. And in Holland, I started working with cane work to see what the technique was like and if I could apply it to my character design, what it would do. It's kind of based on, I like the Mini from Paul Smith. I don't know if anybody of you are familiar with Paul Smith, but he's an English designer, mostly fashion, does a lot with colored striping. So I kind of related that and thought I want to try something like that. So I went for a rainbow pattern because it's kind of a happy looking pattern. And I ended up making these two pieces. They actually took me over a week to make. There's an enormous amount of work involved by pulling the cane, by making these cups that you've seen, and then adding them all together. It can take up to 2 days to make one of these pieces. From there, I moved on. I kind of moved on to my university work at Bournemouth University. Bournemouth University, obviously, they also gave us a curriculum, and I wanted to apply more of what I found in the process that I found in the photosensitive objects that I made with the design of the imagery onto it, where I found it's nicer to work directly onto the material. So I looked into the different materials that you can use, and I ended up working with a paint which is called Paradise Paints. Paradise Paints is a company in America which doesn't exist anymore, shamefully. It burnt down in, I think, 2007. And they haven't restarted yet, so I'm just working my last set of paints at the moment. Paradise Paints is, it's similar to enamels, but the difference is you can layer these quite thick onto the glass and they won't bubble. And I wanted to have a relief in the paints, which is, you can see the relief in the image here. This is the actual piece that you're seeing. What I've done is purely just make a small growl and work directly onto that without any idea of what I was going to do. The narrative behind this work has to be found by the viewer, instead of me telling you what it's about. My project and my degree show were all about spiritual symbolism. And I found that within spiritual symbolism, especially in archaeology, they tend to take anything as spiritual. It doesn't matter what the drawing is like, they'll tell you that it is a spiritual or symbolism towards a god or a deity or anything else. So I kind of wanted to do this in a modern way. I said, again, I did this with paints directly onto the growls, and what you're seeing here is quite magnified. These are miniature paintings. I think they're about 2 inch by 1 inch in total, the size. And the vessel itself stands about half a foot. I struggle with English sizes, so if it doesn't make any sense, then I'll revert back to centimeters. It obviously has multiple sides to it. I tend to aim for a vessel to be turned around and to have a different connotation on each side. And I played around a lot with different inspirations. My inspiration from this is quite simple. It's Keith Haring. As a political artist, he got it right with his graffiti. I relate back to the graffiti scene a lot because of the imagery that they do, and I quite enjoy looking at that. So it comes out in my own work. Keith Haring, again, this is a vessel which I designed to have the stopper related back to the bubble inside. I originally kind of designed these as being either perfume bottles or keepsakes, which enables me to play two markets. A keepsake is like an urn, but it's not. It doesn't have to be so big, it doesn't have the same connotation, it can be a lot cuter, and it can also be inside of the house where you kind of look at it and enjoy it instead of thinking there's a dead person in there. Keepsakes are quite small. Like I said, they stand about 1/2 foot tall, and I've done quite a few of these, and I have sold them as well. They go into galleries and they're quite popular. Again, I've tried to limit the viewpoint in these things. The reason for that being, if you look at the image whilst the vessel is still round, it's just magnified like we saw in the first picture, and this magnification doesn't always help. It's the tiny detail what it's about that I'm trying to kind of show off in these vessels. So what I've done is I've cut two sides of the vessel and I sandblasted the vessels on the outside to limit your viewpoint to two actual images. Which gives you relation of the two images. I can go into every single one has a concept actually, but I don't want to get into that much. It's more about happiness. It's all about being in the moment. It's not automated drawing that I do, but it's kind of doodling where I just sit down and I don't think about what I'm doing. This is a close-up of it, which you'll see the effect. There is a white line around it. This is a technical aspect which I wanted to show you guys because it might be interesting. Paints actually, they respond to the glass colors that I use. And I use a lot of opalines in a really thin layer. And what happens is this paint actually pulls the glass color into it. So it kind of thins out whatever's around it. And there is a shift. If you look closely, you can see that it looks three-dimensional because most of the white's always set to the left. And the reason for that is when I gather the glass from the furnace, I actually layer a new glass over this paint and this opaline color. What happens is the paint slightly shifts. It starts floating on top of the opaline and it will shift by about 1 millimeter. But that gives me an effect which looks like a 3D effect. It's something I quite enjoy doing as well. The nice thing about these things is you don't have to sign the work. My signature is actually inside of the paint in these vessels. And you get to play around a lot, where I'm never really asked what the viewer or the observer found in my symbolism, and I don't really want to know. It needs to be a relationship for them. If anybody can actually come to a relationship with the objects by interacting with them and thinking about them, then I'm happy. Doesn't always have to sell either. When I moved on from that, I started doing product design. I started doing a bit more product design for sales, basically. I kind of wanted to look into an easier to make product because most of the things up to them which I've made weren't really capable to do them within an hour. It took me more than a day to make most of these things. And as a glassmaker, you have to earn money, and it's pounded on the fact that if you start running a studio, you run a furnace 24/7, so you have to think of some products which obviously will help you sell and also help you make money. This piece these pieces are based on the original marbles. I wanted something that I knew in glass as a kid, and I've always appreciated the twisty marble with a nice filigree cane in the middle. But I wanted to make that larger. So I developed a process where I collapsed the vessel and then started pushing a bubble back into it, and you get these effects which basically relate back to the original marble. To me, it's a good connotation anyway, and it also is a good selling point. If you ever do any craft shows, you've got to have this story ready, obviously, if the customer asks you about it. These are perfume bottles, and they look quite large on the screen, but they are actually fairly small, I would say. 2 inches tall, probably 2 inches and a bit. 7 centimeters, which is 2 inches, I think. Now I also made smaller vases. They eventually started becoming something else. Instead of just having one twist, I tried to twist them more and more to see what the effects of it were. If you go too far with it, obviously it doesn't look good. So a bit of limitation is always good with these things, especially in glass. less is more often. You'll find a lot more things in it. Which brings me kind of to my, my final products, which is my Reversion series, which I've been doing here for my AA2A project. My AA2A project started quite a few years ago when I came into contact with Alberto Cerveso. He's a photographer, actually English-based. I'm pretty sure he's Italian. But he photographs ink in water, and this is an ink cloud in water or a paint cloud in water, and he does this with super high-speed photography and really good frames. And I found the movement, which I find in these pictures, enormously intriguing, especially because it doesn't seem to stop moving when you look at them. And this moment in time as well, it's a suspended moment in time. It's something that you kind of, it's color and life together, which to me meant if I could replicate this in glass, I would have a good product and actually something to show, which I was proud of. There's several more images. Obviously, the mixing of colors is quite important, depth of color is quite important, and with glass you get to use a lot of transparency. So I ended up doing my first iterations of these with a lot of different colors, layered over a white background, just to get more transparency to the actual color and not have the light passing through. If the light passes through, it's the same as with these images. You can't see what's behind it because it actually blocks off. So I ended up mixing all these colors together, blowing a large vessel, and then I had to destroy the vessel, which also became the process. This destruction is actually part of what my concept is these days. Life and rebirth. I've started naming these vessels. In the beginning I started naming them motion, which is quite directly related to this movement of color. But the process gives me a reversion, and a reversion is a rebirth, which basically is what my product is, a rebirth. When I make these vessels, I have to destroy a vessel to make another vessel, and that's why the colors inside are quite random. I have an influence on the depth of color, I have an influence on which colors I use. I also get to influence how they come out in shape and size, but I don't get to influence what the color on the inside does. So sometimes I get to have happy accidents. Especially in the beginning, I had trouble keeping the depth right and everything else. You'll see in the progress of these images that I try to use complementary colors as well as contrasting colors. I find with a vessel these days, I'm trying to have a complementary side and a contrasting side, which gives me a warm and a cold side. It also helps with people who want to buy the product. They have a choice in what they display on during the day. You can actually swap the vessel around if you like. The colors, the vessels that I started doing in the beginning, I blew them out quite large. I've put these two images next to each other because I wanted to show you that by blowing them out large, you get the colors to be quite thin and it fills the vessel. This is a flat vessel that you're looking at. There is no magnification in it. And the vessel left of that is not a flat vessel. The magnification helps with the depth of color, I found. There is a moment where as soon as I folded all this back to itself, there is a small amount of space in between all the colors, and it's probably about 1 to 3 millimeters. And this is magnified by adding layers of glass to it. You can't see the layers, obviously, it just becomes one transparent layer. And this magnification is also part of the movement again, because as soon as you walk around the vessel warps. It's, the colors inside tend to look like they're moving, which is something I wanted to try and develop a bit further. This is the reason I started adding a lot more glass to the base. And this base gave me an elevation. This suspension, again, this moment that it's hanging there, which everybody expects it to, well, at least in your mind, there's an expectation for it to start moving. So I developed that a bit further, and I found out that by using the depth of the glass, so by using the lens, I get to create a lot more space in between these layers. There isn't actually a lot of difference in the technique, it just means adding more glass to it. In the beginning, these vessels were, I think they stand about 1 foot tall again. I was limited by technique and by skill. And eventually they've become quite large. The vessels I do now are up to 2 foot tall and they weigh up to 12 kilos, which on the end of a blowing iron can be multiplied by about 3. And I'm not that strong, as you can see, I'm not the biggest guy ever. Hence I work with a lot of the Czech guys. Martin, Ondro, you saw earlier in the pictures. They all have the skills from the factory trade, and that means that they're built quite well to do this work. So you have to find a good team to work with. It's for me, it's always been finding these teams. That's why I do a lot of traveling. I do different types of work in different places. Like I said, I don't make this work in Holland because I don't have the skills to do it on my own. I get to help here. I get to use Jim as my assistant, and I've done it with a few students. Thanks for the help, obviously. The project I've worked on at this moment is based on these vessels. These are my latest vessels, which I've also applied to the Biennale with. Biennale is this year, by the way. It's the British Glass Biennale. Now, these are larger vessels, which obviously this is the same vessel that you're seeing. It just has several different sides to it. And this is a different vessel, again, photographed from a different angle to show you that there is an actual depth over the layers as well. I get a few bubbles every so often. I don't mind this. Classical glass is something which I think is from the past. We all look at glass successionism, but also look at product development for myself. And the bubbles don't make the product any less valuable or any less strong. It's not a flaw to me. It's just part of the weave, as we would say. It's also part of the technique. So you'll always see a few bubbles in my vessels. The first time I started thinking about doing linear work, so the work that I did with all the cane work on those little monkeys that you saw earlier with the rainbow effects, these canes gave me an idea about lines and how lines also give you a perspective on direction of movement. And I wanted to try this out in my vessels, but I thought that a vessel would be slightly limited for that because it'll just turn out like another vase, and I want to kind of move into a different realm of glass, which is sculptural glass. It doesn't have to be something, but it just has to have a presence in the house and not be functional. So I might make enormously large paperweights at the moment, as you would probably call them. They don't look like paperweights, but this is the first iteration of that. What you're looking at is actually a side view. So you're looking at something which is the shape of a Smartie or an M&M, and you're looking into the side of this. And I realized that the magnification is something I do like, and especially works really well with the line work. This is a top view of the same actual object. But I don't like the fact that it fills the entire space. You don't get to see that there is a levitation, that there is a suspension going on. There is a lot of movement in it, so I wanted to develop that a bit, and I came out making something which has got a base cup. It's a very traditional shape. It looks like it's got a bowl underneath it. This bowl is actually not a large bowl, it's just being magnified. And what you're looking at is this is the bowl, and that's the actual reversion inside. Now this reversion, the process is quite long. Again, I've made myself a product which takes about 6 hours to make in the studio. Some of you have experienced me seeing me sweating in there. I like the product a lot at the moment. I'm still developing it. I'm still not actually done with my project either. I'll be back in April. But for my first conclusions were that the base cup to it actually gives me an element of levitation, this suspension. By containing it, it actually looks like it's suspended instead of it fills the entire space. It also gives you a limited viewpoint again, which I've come back to because if you look at these vessels from every angle, they just start blending into the space around them, and that's what I don't want. I want this vessel to stand alone. So I ended up kind of containing it and doing complementary colors. The line work in itself is a good success. I still have to play around a bit more with the colors. I'm doing a lot of complementary colors and a lot of white background at the moment. This is a blue line on a white background, whereas the effect of this is really good, especially if you do the close-up shots. The line work in blue is laying above the white, which gives me a shadow effect and again a different depth effect. So what I've tried to alter with these is to go for contrasting colors, and I've gone for a contrast in the actual base cup. As you may be able to see on this picture, I've done the cane work in the cup, the base as well. So the bowl that's suspending the actual reversion has got a motion to it, it's got a direction to it. It also has different colors to it, which makes it more exciting to look at it, I think. And with the top reversion, I've actually, instead of doing a colored line, I've done a colored cane with a white line in the middle, which gives me the option to relate that back to the white background. The white background is there constantly, and that's just because as soon as I go transparent on these things, they become too complicated to look at. It's just your eye can't perceive where the line is going, and what I want is to create a sort of effect where it's allows me to work as a designer again. I'll show you the next image, because basically this contract is something I'm working towards now. I've done my last 2 pieces this week, or last time I was here, not this week, last week. And I'm quite satisfied with them. The project is moving on. I've got to present it next April, actually hopefully presenting it at the Biennale as well. I've contacted them about it. They're allowing me to do a demo during the Biennale, which helps me get my work out there. Obviously, as an artist, I'm trying to approach as many different angles as possible, not just craft market. And this is a compilation of the images that I've took of the work. Actually, it's a photographer who works here, David Williams. If you ever need a photographer, he's a really good photographer, really friendly guy as well. He did this compilation of the close-ups for me. You can see kind of my progress during the work. These are the last images I took. And I'm quite satisfied with it. So I hope that I haven't spoken too fast. I think I've only been here for about 20 minutes so far. But if you've got any questions, please ask me, because...
I'll give you a round of applause.
Thank you. Please, any questions?
Yeah. Hi. You worked in several different parts of the world, you know, in Utrecht and...
Japan, Czech, Germany, Sweden.
Oh, right. You, it might be an obvious question, but have you found a different approach to making glass?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I found discipline in Japan. That's something I haven't found in Europe yet. But Czech glassmaking techniques. Czech glassmaking techniques are completely different from what we know here in what you would say Western Europe. The Czech glassmaking techniques is more based on mold blowing and production work. So they have a stand-up way of working. They don't actually sit down and bench it, not too much anyway. And they work a lot thinner than we do. English glass, Dutch glass, Belgian glass is all quite thick. It's all about optics. And the further eastern you go, the thinner it gets. Obviously, Italian glass we know as being thin and colorful and everything else, but I have never looked at Italy for my inspiration. And it's because they're kind of stuck, I think. And if I take my inspiration from something that's stuck, I'm not going to move on either. But yeah, there are a lot of different techniques, and I enjoy working with other glass makers just for that reason. I get to travel. Jim here, James Maskery, has also showed me different techniques that I haven't come across yet. I think everybody that's ever worked in a different factory will also work a different style. You can be taught by one person, but you'll never kind of pick up on their way of working. You've got to be taught by different people, and then eventually you will develop your own style of work and also your own techniques. And that's why I travel a lot. In Holland, there's not a lot of education for glass. The reason I actually ended up coming here is because I wanted to learn. But the reason I've gone away from here is because the teaching style here is based on the weakest link. If you go to a college degree, a degree course, anything else, it's the tutors always have to spend time on the weakest person in the group. So they never get time to actually progress with you. You're kind of progressing on your own, which means that any studio work will give you more technique. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I was asking because we were in Venice for the Biennale, and we're looking to go into a couple of studios and factories. And what was striking there was that they were craftsmen, and they weren't artists. I wonder if that might be why they're stuck with very traditional approaches, very traditional ways of designing.
It's a really good question. I mean, I don't see myself as an artist. I see myself as a craftsman and a designer. I do make art, but it's a very big title, and it's the same as a master glass maker. I don't measure the title to me. If anybody else gives me the title, I'm okay with that. And craft and design and art, there's a big discussion about this, and I can talk about it for the next hour if I want to. In Holland, I'm seen as a craftsperson. I'm not seen as a designer, even though I have a degree. As a maker, you'll never be seen as a designer in Holland. Strangely enough, if you make your own designs, you're just a craftsperson. And I think that's all over the world. There are differences again. In Japan, they have no standing. I couldn't get the discussion going there. They are craftspeople. They see themselves as craft, but craft is more treated as art as it is here. So it's the perspective of the buyer actually that interests me more, not what people say and how I'm perceived as being an artist or anything else. And yeah, I do think that there is a lot of differences in the countries. As in, again, Italy being so traditional, they have got artists, but they're glass artists, and I see them as an artist. Lino Tagliapetra, Pino Cerci. These are people which I look up to because they have progressed and pushed the medium forward. But I think in the eyes of the Italian public, they're just craftsmen. So it's a discussion, it's not an answer. Anybody, please?
Would you be happy to let the Czech brutes take over and make much bigger versions of your work,
Yeah.
and not handle it at all?
Yeah, no, I would, as long as I'm involved in the process, so as long as I can be there, it's not like I hand off a drawing and then get it back, because I do like being in the studio, but I would happily let somebody else who's got better skills than me try it.
Do you make, do you make a lot of decisions while you're on the pipe?
Yeah.
So that's why it's kind of, yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that
It's
would
the
make it
process
kind of
which
important.
I enjoy.
You can't actually, like, keep yourself completely uninvolved from the making of the
Yeah,
work.
it's eventually, if I let somebody else make my work over and over, they will start developing the process themselves as well, and it will turn out different from what it would be when it's my process.
And at this stage in your career, how important is it for you to make literally the same object over and over again? I mean, you have a series, I suppose, but within that series, are you actually making products, or are they individuals within
No,
the series?
there's especially my Reversion series, just the color work, they are products. I have to prize myself a bit lucky there because, like I said earlier, I've got an influence on the shape and the color, but what it does on the inside of the object after I've applied my technique doesn't always do the same thing. So I can literally make 5 the same objects and they won't look the same, which is a really good selling point, and it also makes for a happier artist because I get to see things in my work which I try and develop eventually afterwards. Happy mistake, like I said. So yeah, I do make over and over the same product, but it doesn't turn out the same.
And in that being said, is that, like, in terms of your target market, do you find your work more received well in things like, I don't know, fairs, or like design craft fairs, or do you find like galleries more?
The context I place myself in is design and craft.
Yeah.
There's a lot of galleries that are interested in my work and they're happy to sell it for me, but I like being in direct contact with the customer.
Okay.
Especially getting the feedback is also good. So craft fairs, even though I know it's a market type thing, that's the context especially for the vessel work that I've been doing. I don't have a context for this work yet. The reason for that being I've been free to just develop it into something which eventually might cost me too much to make it. I might not have enough backers for it. I might not have enough money for it. So it's just something that I wanted to try out when I got free studio time here. And as you point out, it's important to find your own context. Are you an artist, but are you playing the craft market? Then you should move your work up to a different standing. Look at sizing. Look at other things as well.
What would be your aspiration? Let's say, where would you like that work to go?
This work specifically,
no, I mean,
my work.
Yeah, your work.
Well, where I'd like to see myself going, I like teaching. I also like working, like I said, with other artists and other designers. I do make work for other people as well, and they come with their designs and I will develop it with them. And I would like to see myself eventually as a gaffer. My main goal, or my ultimate goal, is to be a gaffer at Pilchuck maybe once in my life. You have to have an enormous amount of skills for this, and the reason for that is you'll get the best of the best in designers and artists. They come there, and you end up working for them. And that's kind of my ultimate goal, but that's skills-wise. I've never looked at my product range as being this is going to make me famous or this is going to be my business, because I actually own a studio and it's still in storage. I'm too afraid to start it up. I don't like the gas bill, I don't like the pressure, and at the moment I do quite well for myself. I have a good balance in working outside of my own product and selling my own product at the same time, which balances me out. So, I hope that makes sense.
There is life after uni. Is that what you're saying?
No, you've got to set your goals. That's the thing. I like technique. I started off saying I've come from a technical background anyway. My father is an engineer. My mother is a teacher, so that kind of bleeds into what I do. I like everything from a technical perspective, and I do like practical aspects of my work and enjoying being in a team and working for other people. So eventually, skills, that's what I want to build on. The more skills I can have, the better the glass industry will survive. Because there aren't a lot of us anymore.
No, that's true. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Good.